It started on what seemed like an ordinary evening. We had just finished dinner, and the usual discussions about household matters transitioned into something sharper, more charged. She looked at me exasperated as I asked her about a bill that needed paying. A routine question. Her response was anything but routine. With a tone that cut through the air, she said, "I'm not your property." Her words hung in the room like a storm cloud. At first, I didn't know how to react. Was it an accusation, a statement of defiance, a declaration of independence? The way she said it, her tone, the look in her eyes, felt like she was drawing a line in the sand, challenging the very foundation of what I believed our relationship was built on. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I just nodded, but inside, something shifted. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was something colder, something resolute. Her words echoed in my mind as I cleared the table in silence. I thought about how much I had sacrificed over the years, working long hours, handling problems, and constantly making sure everything in her life ran smoothly. And now I was hearing that none of it mattered because, to her, I was apparently treating her like property. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Was she right? Had I been controlling? Had I reduced her role in our relationship to something transactional? Or was this her way of shirking the responsibilities we both agreed to when we got married? It was impossible to tell what she truly meant, but one thing was clear to me. She didn't see herself as accountable to me in the way I had always seen myself as accountable to her. As I stared at the ceiling in the dark, a quiet resolve grew within me. Fine, I thought. If she didn't want to be my property, I wouldn't treat her as such. But that also meant she couldn't expect me to shoulder the burden of being responsible for her. It wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness. If she wanted independence, I'd give it to her. Completely. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. But I was already different. The mental shift I'd made was absolute. I decided to keep my actions subtle, at least at first. No grand announcements, no confrontations. Instead, I'd let the situation speak for itself. When she asked if I'd pay a bill that week, I told her calmly, "You can handle it." She gave me a confused look, but didn't say much. It was a small thing, but to me, it was symbolic. I wasn't going to be her caretaker anymore. I wasn't going to manage her life while she dismissed my role as something oppressive or insignificant. Throughout the day, I noticed other opportunities to let her take the reins. When the faucet in the kitchen started leaking, I didn't grab my toolbox. When her car needed gas, I didn't take it to the station like I usually would. Each time she seemed puzzled, maybe even annoyed, but she didn't push back. Not yet. The declaration she had made the night before was still fresh in my mind, fueling my determination. I wasn't angry, I was focused. This wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. If she didn't want to be treated like she belonged to me, then she couldn't expect the privileges that came with that kind of relationship. I wouldn't interfere in her life, but I also wouldn't prop it up. By the end of the day, I could sense a slight tension in the air. She noticed that something was off, but she hadn't connected the dots yet, and I wasn't about to explain it to her. If she wanted independence, she'd have to own it, every single part of it. That evening, as I lay in bed once again, I felt an odd sense of clarity. This wasn't a game or a temporary phase. This was a shift in how I saw our relationship and how I would handle it going forward. Whatever came next, I was ready to let her see exactly what life without my ownership truly looked like. The next morning, I woke up early, as usual, but this time I didn't feel the familiar sense of obligation pulling me out of bed. I stayed there for a few extra minutes, listening to the sounds of her morning routine starting down the hall. Normally, I'd be the one making coffee, but today I stayed put. Let her take care of it, I thought. When I finally got up, I found her in the kitchen, standing near the coffee maker with a mug in hand. The car keys were next to her, and I could tell she was expecting me to mention her oil change, something she'd been reminding me about all week. But I didn't. I poured myself some coffee and sat down, scrolling through my phone as if it were just another day. "You're going to take the car in today, right?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. I didn't look up. "No, you can handle that." She froze, her mug halfway to her lips. "What do you mean? You always take care of that." I shrugged. Not this time. It's your car. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything more. She left the house with a brisk, clipped goodbye, and I could hear the faint slam of the car door as she drove off. That was the first small crack in the routine, but it didn't end there. Throughout the day, I went about my business with a deliberate detachment. She called me during her lunch break to remind me about an insurance payment, something I'd always handled without fail. Hey, don't forget the car insurance is due tomorrow, she said casually. I didn't hesitate. You can pay it. The account details are in the folder. There was a pause just long enough for me to sense the confusion on the other end. Why are you acting like this? She finally asked. I kept my tone calm. I'm not acting like anything. I'm just letting you handle things you're perfectly capable of doing. The line went quiet again before she let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Okay, fine, whatever. When she came home that evening, the tension was palpable. I deliberately left a couple of things undone, like not taking out the trash, something I usually did without fail. I could see her glance at the overflowing bin as she walked into the kitchen. She didn't say anything, but her frustration was written all over her face. Dinner was another quiet affair. She was waiting for me to say something, to explain myself, but I didn't. I cooked for myself, left the dishes in the sink, and went back to my own tasks without offering to do anything for her. It wasn't spite. It was a quiet demonstration of what life looked like without the responsibilities she had come to expect me to shoulder. That night, she finally broke the silence. Are you going to tell me what's going on? She asked, her voice sharp. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. You said you're not my property, right? Her expression hardened. Yeah, I said that. Well, I replied evenly, if you're not my property, then you're not my responsibility either. Her mouth opened as if she were about to argue, but no words came out. She stood there for a moment, staring at me, before turning and walking out of the room. I heard the bedroom door close with a sharp click. As I sat there in the quiet aftermath, I felt a strange mix of emotions. This wasn't easy. There was no satisfaction in watching her struggle with the shift in our dynamic. But I knew it was necessary. If she wanted independence, I was determined to let her have it, even if it meant dismantling the foundation we had built together, one small piece at a time. The next few days were a quiet unraveling. I stuck to my plan, maintaining my calm exterior while removing myself from tasks and responsibilities I once handled without a second thought. The cracks in our routine grew wider with every passing day. The first significant break came one evening when she returned from work. The house was darker than usual, and the trash was still sitting by the door where I had left it. Normally, I'd have already taken it out, turned on the lights, and started dinner. Instead, I was in the living room watching a show, completely unbothered. She walked in, glanced around, and sighed audibly. Are you seriously just sitting there? She asked, her voice tinged with frustration. I didn't even look up. Yep, long day? She dropped her bag onto the counter with more force than necessary. You could at least take out the trash. I shrugged. It's not that heavy. You can manage. Her eyes widened slightly as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. For a moment, it seemed like she might argue, but instead she grabbed the trash bag and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The next morning, I woke up to find the sink piled with dishes. It was the first time I'd seen her leave them unwashed, a small act of defiance. She wasn't going to let me win easily, but I wasn't looking to win. I was looking to make a point. Throughout the week, the dominoes continued to fall. The groceries ran low because I didn't restock the pantry. Her laundry sat untouched in the basket, even though I'd always done it without being asked. Small inconveniences began to stack up, and her frustration grew more visible with each passing day. By midweek, the tension reached a boiling point. She came home after work to find that I hadn't paid the utility bill. I knew because the lights had been shut off earlier that afternoon. I could have paid it in a few minutes, but I didn't. This time, I wanted her to feel the consequences directly. She stormed into the living room, her face flushed with anger. The power's out, she shouted. Why didn't you pay the bill? I met her gaze calmly. You knew it was due. The account details are in the folder. She threw her hands up in exasperation. Why are you doing this? You're being so childish. I stood up slowly, letting her words hang in the air. Childish? You said you're not my property, remember? I'm respecting that. But if you're not my property, then I'm not your caretaker. You want independence? Fine. But independence means taking responsibility for your life. Her expression faltered for a moment, as if she wasn't sure how to respond. Then, with a bitter laugh, she shook her head. This isn't independence. This is just you being petty. I didn't argue. I just let her words hang in the air as I walked past her into the kitchen. I wasn't interested in convincing her. I wanted her to understand. That night, she ended up on the phone with customer service, trying to sort out the power issue. I could hear the frustration in her voice as she navigated the automated system, something I would have handled with ease before. Watching her struggle wasn't satisfying, but it reinforced my decision. If she wanted me to step back, I would do so completely, even if it made life harder for both of us. By the end of the week, the house felt different. It wasn't just the mess piling up or the tasks left undone. It was the silence, the unspoken tension between us. We had slipped into a cold war of sorts, each testing the other's limits. The once seamless rhythm of our relationship had become disjointed, a series of missed beats and awkward silences. And yet, I remained steadfast. If this was the path she wanted, I would follow it to its conclusion, no matter where it led. By the end of that week, the tension in the house was suffocating. The power had been restored, the trash finally taken out, and some of the groceries restocked. But not by me. She was doing the bare minimum to keep things functioning, but the weight of our unraveling routine was visible in her every move. The silence between us had turned into a battlefield, each of us waiting for the other to speak first. That Saturday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and scrolling through my phone. She walked in, her hair still messy from sleep, and went straight to the fridge. The empty shelves greeted her, and she slammed the door shut. This can't keep going, she said, her voice tight. I didn't look up. What can't? She spun around to face me. This, whatever this is. You acting like you're some passive observer in this house. We're supposed to be a team. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair. Are we? Because last time I checked, you said you're not my property. Teams rely on responsibility, and I don't think I'm part of yours anymore. She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. Don't twist my words. I didn't mean I wanted you to check out of our life completely. Well, that's the thing about words, I replied, my tone calm but firm. Once they're out there, they mean something. You made it clear you don't want to feel like you owe me anything. Fine, but that goes both ways. Her frustration boiled over. This isn't about owing anyone anything. It's about respect, about not feeling like my life revolves around your decisions. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. Respect? I said, my voice finally rising. Do you think respect is me silently fixing every problem, paying every bill, and cleaning up every mess without so much as a thank you? Do you think respect is telling me that all of that effort makes you feel like property? Because if that's what you think, then you don't know the first thing about respect. She flinched, her arms dropping to her sides. For a moment, the fight drained out of her, but then she straightened, her voice quieter but no less firm. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to do everything. No, I said, stepping closer. But you expected it. Every time I stepped in to make things easier, you let me. Every time I picked up the slack, you leaned on it. And when I tried to talk about how it felt to carry all of that, you dismissed it as control. Her eyes glossed over and she looked away, her hands clenching into fists. So what now? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Do we just keep tearing each other apart? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned back to the table, picking up my coffee cup and staring into it. I don't know, I admitted finally, but I do know I'm done being the only one carrying the weight. If this is what you wanted, true independence, then you've got it. But don't expect me to pick up the pieces when things fall apart. She stood there for a long moment, as if waiting for me to take back my words. When I didn't, she let out a shaky breath and walked out of the room. I heard the bedroom door close softly this time, a far cry from the slamming doors of the past few days. I stayed in the kitchen for a while, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The house felt impossibly quiet, the kind of silence that settles in after a storm. For the first time, I wasn't sure if there was anything left to salvage, or if either of us even wanted to try. After that confrontation, things didn't magically resolve. If anything, the divide between us seemed to deepen. Days passed in a strange, tense limbo where we shared the same space but moved around each other like strangers. Every interaction felt calculated, every word measured. It was clear that neither of us knew how to bridge the gap, or if we even wanted to. The first ripple of consequences came when her friend Emily called. Normally, Emily would call her directly, but this time she reached out to me. "Hey," she said cautiously, "I've been trying to get a hold of her, but she's not answering. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. "She's fine," I replied. "Just busy." "Busy?" Emily sounded skeptical. "She missed lunch with us on Saturday. That's not like her." I didn't know what to say, so I deflected. "Maybe you should ask her about it." That seemed to be the end of it, but it wasn't. A few days later, my mother called. Apparently, my wife had confided in her during a moment of frustration. My mother's tone was stern, the way it had been when I was a teenager in trouble. "What's going on between you two?" she demanded. "She said you're refusing to help with anything. That doesn't sound like you." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "It's complicated." "Well, maybe you should uncomplicate it," she snapped. "Marriage isn't about keeping score, it's about partnership." Her words stung, but I didn't argue. There was no point in explaining the nuances to someone who wasn't living in our house, who didn't feel the weight of unspoken expectations and resentment that had built up over years. The fallout wasn't just personal, though. The strain started creeping into other areas of our lives. At work, I found myself distracted, replaying conversations in my head, wondering where it had all gone wrong. She was dealing with her own challenges. I overheard her on a Zoom call with her boss, apologizing for missing a deadline. That wasn't like her. She was always the one who had it together, who stayed on top of things. But lately, the cracks in her professional demeanor were starting to show. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch with her laptop open, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when she heard me come in, her eyes tired and red. "The Wi-Fi isn't working," she said flatly. "I called the provider, but they said the account is overdue." I stood there for a moment, torn between stepping in and letting her handle it. Finally, I said, "You know how to pay it, right?" She didn't respond. Instead, she closed the laptop and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. Her words caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely at the room. "All of it. I feel like I'm drowning, and you're just standing there watching." I wanted to argue, to remind her that this was the independence she had asked for. But looking at her in that moment, I couldn't. She didn't look defiant or strong. She looked exhausted, and that's when it hit me. The consequences of our standoff weren't just affecting her. They were affecting both of us. The house was a mess. The bills were piling up, and we were both too stubborn to admit that this wasn't working. Whatever point I had been trying to make was starting to lose its meaning in the face of what we were actually losing: each other. I sat down across from her, the silence between us heavy. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a stalemate, like we had both run out of moves. "I didn't want it to get to this point," I said finally. She looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Sadness, maybe, or regret. Neither did I. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing, both of us trying to figure out what came next in the aftermath of everything we'd let fall apart. We didn't fix things that night. There was no magical reconciliation, no heartfelt apologies or promises to change. Instead, the days that followed were filled with an unspoken truce. It wasn't agreement, it was exhaustion. We had reached the limit of what either of us could endure. The first change came in small, hesitant steps. The next morning, I woke up to find her at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, bills, receipts, and account statements. She looked up as I entered the room, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then she gestured toward the chair across from her. "Can we go through these together?" she asked quietly. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't defiance either. I sat down and we started sorting through the mess we'd both ignored for too long. She had questions about payments and due dates, and I answered without judgment or sarcasm. For the first time in weeks, we were working together, not because one of us demanded it, but because we both knew it had to be done. That small act of cooperation set the tone for the days that followed. She began taking more initiative, calling the utility companies, scheduling appointments, and even cooking dinner without waiting for me to step in. Meanwhile, I found myself stepping back into roles I'd abandoned, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to help. I'd wash the dishes she left in the sink or take out the trash without being asked. It wasn't a return to the way things had been, but it was a start. The conversations started to come, slowly at first. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, she muted the show and turned to me. "Do you really think I don't appreciate you?" she asked. I looked at her, surprised by the sudden question. "Sometimes it felt like you didn't," I admitted. "Like everything I did was just expected, never noticed." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I didn't mean for it to feel that way. I guess I got so used to you handling everything that I forgot what it must have been like for you. And I forgot to tell you when I needed help," I said. Instead of saying something, I just let it build up until it turned into resentment. That honesty was a turning point. We started having more of those conversations, real ones, where we said what we felt without fear of starting another fight. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of tension, but the effort was mutual now. Over time, we began to redefine what our relationship looked like. It wasn't about one of us carrying the other anymore. It was about sharing the load. She learned to lean on me without becoming dependent, and I learned to step back without feeling like I was abandoning her. Things weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. The mess in our house slowly disappeared, but the scars of those weeks lingered. They served as a reminder of how close we had come to losing everything and how much work it had taken to find a new balance. One night, as we sat down for dinner, she reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "I don't want to go back to how things were," she said, "but I don't want to lose this either." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Me neither." And just like that, we found our new normal, not as property or responsibility, but as partners learning to navigate the messiness of life together.